Welcome to video number 3 in the WallyTractor instructional video series. In this video, I'm going to go over a few tips and tricks and some pitfalls to watch out for when you're going about the process of aligning your stylus and cantilever assembly. Many of us need to use readers, but even if you don't need to use readers, it is quite possible that your vision deteriorates when you get real close to the subject. So whether you use readers or not, you could probably increase your visibility just by wearing some magnification like these. You can get them cheaply at a drugstore. I can certainly recommend one of the things that I employ. That is, in addition to my readers, I wear a second pair of readers. This increases my magnification, and I encourage you to try it out. Of course, you could use a headset like this that you can easily get on Amazon, but if I've got 2 readers laying about, that's usually all it takes for me. Now for illumination, we want as much natural light as you can get. Particularly when aligning the cantilever, I really do like to use a flashlight. Now, to give you a perspective of how it's best used, imagine that this is a clock face and the center of the clock face is the cartridge. So there's 12 o'clock, I'm at 6 o'clock. So when you get down to the level of the disc, you shine a light at about 3 o'clock to 2 o'clock right at the cantilever, and you will see it pop. Right when it gets hit with a light from either 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, it seems to just pop, and that's very helpful. Here's a tip for those of you who've got a cartridge body that does a good job of hiding the cantilever, making it difficult to see from this perspective when you have to align it at the null points. So here's what I recommend. When you get down to look at that cantilever, just reach around to the cueing arm and just lift up the arm so that the stylus will hover above the alignment mark. And when you do that, when you just lift the arm up enough so that the stylus will hover above that mark, you have relieved the vertical tracking force from the cantilever and will cause it to descend a little bit, making a little bit more of it visible. This process of using the cueing arm to just hover the stylus above the alignment marks will certainly be absolutely essential for those of you who have used the Wally Skater and determined that your arm has quite a bit of excessive internal horizontal torque force. We need to alleviate that before you align the cantilever. We go into this in the videos on horizontal torque force related to the Wally Skater. So it's worth getting used to that hover method for a variety of different reasons. Now, for those of you who have had your cartridge analyzed or have purchased from us one of the Wally shims, chances are that you have had a VTA SRA adjustment using the shim, which gets the butt of the cartridge down. And in doing so, more of the cantilever becomes visible to you when you're aligning from this perspective. So it's another good reason to shim the cartridge in order to get that vertical tracking angle down to where it needs to be, 18 to 20 degrees. More on this, watch our video on VTA. The process of revolving the cartridge to correct for your cantilever's angular error can have a slight effect on overhang, which is why we want to keep one of the screws snug and the other one loose, and we revolve around the snug screw. But if you've got a lot of rotational correction to make, you might consider making it in 2 steps, where alternatively you've got, let's say, the right screw snug, make a little rotation to clockwise, let's say, and then snug down the left screw and loosen the right one, and continue the clockwise rotation. Now, because you've alternatively used the left screw and the right screw as your snug screw around which you're revolving, you are both changing the overhang very slightly forward and aftward, hopefully in equal amounts, so you don't change it at all. When you revolve your cartridge to correct for even very small cantilever angular error, it doesn't take much movement at all to get into the ballpark that you're aiming for. What I like to do when I am making very small rotational corrections is I don't look at the cartridge screws, I don't look at the cartridge, I look at the end of the cartridge pins. and watch the end of the cartridge pin for movement. Why do I watch the end of the cartridge pin? Because it is the point that is furthest away but still fixed to the cartridge that I'm revolving. So when you're making this rotational correction and you're watching the end of the cartridge clips, it's also very helpful to keep in close proximity in your eye a fixed point of reference, something that won't move when the cartridge clips do move. And for me, and have them very close to each other, and for me that's the arm wand. I want to see the arm wand before I start my rotational movement. I want to see the arm wand and the cartridge clips very close to each other in my line of sight. That way, when the cartridge clips do move, it's easy to see that they've moved just a tiny bit. There. As mentioned earlier in this series, this pivot to spindle ruler is used to perform the exact dimension for which it's named, pivot to spindle dimension. But you aren't necessarily going to have to use this at all. This is here in case you run into a problem. In most cases, your Tonearm manufacturer will call out what its effective length is for the arm, and you're just going to look for that effective length on the WallyTractor when aligning your overhang. But occasionally some users of the WallyTractor find that they can't actually reach that arc, no matter how far forward or rearward they push the cartridge in the head shell. And if this applies to you, where you cannot reach your effective length arc, then that is the time to get out this pivot to spindle ruler. So once you have the jig on the platter, it's flat against the platter, the ruler is on the jig, and it is roughly parallel with the platter. I want you to look straight down and take that reading, right in the center of that pivot housing. Now, that's your pivot to spindle distance. However, many of you will have cylindrical shaped pivot housings that do not have a marking as to where the center is. Well, the solution is easy. We're going to take two measurements and take the average of those two measurements to find the center. So we'll need to measure the proximal distance and the distal dimension. So that means the point, the shortest point between the spindle and the closest part of that cylindrical housing, and then secondarily the dimension between the spindle and the furthest or distal part of the cylindrical housing. Take those two readings and then average them. That is where the center is. Now you've got the pivot to spindle dimension. Okay, well, you can compare that to what the manufacturer says it should be. Look, if it's 1 or 1.5 millimeters, maybe even 2 millimeters off, don't sweat it too much. We can make up for that for the most part in the head shell slots. Now that you have this pivot to spindle dimension, as mentioned in the first video, you can go to the website, plug that number into the calculator, and it'll spit out what the effective length is that you should be using. If the calculator online gives you a figure that isn't within, let's say, about 1 millimeter of any arc on the WallyTractor, feel free to reach out to us with your issue and give us that pivot to spindle dimension. Also tell us which Tonearm you're using, and we'll do our best to get you sorted. You might wonder if the WallyTractor can be used on linear tracking Tonearms. And the answer is definitely yes, but there is one proviso. Now, there are two types of linear tracking Tonearms for the most part. There are linear tangential bearings, and those are the type where you've got a rail and that usually a cylinder or a carriage rides along a slideway. Well, for that, you would simply set the position of your stylus using the radial line that goes right through all of the cantilever alignment marks. And then, of course, you can use any one of those cantilever alignment marks you like to align the cantilever. If, however, you have a pivoted linear bearing, you will have to use your Tonearm manufacturer's alignment jig to set the position of the stylus relative to the pivot points of that Tonearm. But you can certainly use the mirrored surface of the WallyTractor to align your cantilever. Definitely you want to use a mirrored surface for that to eliminate parallax error. So go ahead on any type of tone arm to use the WallyTractor for their cantilever alignment. The previous version of the WallyTractor Universal had two alignment schemes available on it that we were calling old record collection alignment and new record collection alignment. The difference between these two alignment schemes was simply taking advantage of the fact that after about 1990, according to our 1,300 records that we measured, there was a significant decrease in the innermost groove radius that engineers were cutting to. And with that information, we could reapply Baer, Walden, Lofgren's formulas and find our new null points and thereby decrease overall distortion over that new playing area by quite a lot. However, what we didn't realize at the time when we created these two schema was that zenith error was at least 10 times greater issue on average in the marketplace versus the small amount of advantage that we would have obtained by moving from the old to new record collection alignment marks. And that, of course, only for those of you that had newer record collections. So we've decided that we need to shift people's attention to the much bigger gain that they can have by correcting for their zenith error. So we are de-emphasizing the new record collection alignment scheme. In the future, we may make a second version of the WallyTractor with those arcs available on it, but for now, we're just focusing on the IEC standards, which is what we were calling the old record collection alignment scheme. I highly recommend that instead of fussing over the differences and the advantage of old versus new on your record collection, that you instead focus on the improvements that can be obtained by correcting your zenith error. Watch the videos that we've done on zenith error for you to get an idea of how large of an issue this is. That's really where the low-hanging fruit is. And with the Wally Zenith tool, there's even a way to correct for your zenith error using your hearing alone. It's a specific process. It is a little bit tedious. It's a lot more difficult than sending your cartridge to us for analysis, where we will know exactly what your zenith error is. But it's definitely doable, and I've had quite a number of people report back to me that they can hear as little as a half a degree of angular error difference. If you want to see what this process of correcting your zenith error by ear looks like, download the Wally Zenith instructional manual on the Wally Zenith webpage. We've reached the end of this 3-video instructional series. You should have everything you need now to align that stylus cantilever perfectly. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to us. We're here to help. And as always, enjoy analog forever.